The Rebbe Zolgesenstein began the Farbrengen this afternoon that it is Shabbos Zocher. And Shabbos Zocher, we know, is the Kriya of Zocher is Asher Osa L'cha Amalek. And this is a Kriya which we are obligated to hear min HaTorah. In fact, according to most opinions, this is the only Kriyas HaTorah which we are obligated to hear mid'oraisa. So this shows us on the greatness of this Shabbos. But like every Inyan in Kedusha, there are other Inyanim also on this Shabbos. And being, especially that it is in Kedusha, and especially in light of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that all of the Inyanim are b'hashgacha pratis, so all the Inyanim which come together on this Shabbos, there is a shaychus, there is a contact between all of these Inyanim which accumulate on this Shabbos. The fact that it is Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh, and the fact that it is Tes Adar 9 days in the month of Adar, as well that it is Shabbos Parshas Zocher, there is a shaychus between all of these Inyanim. It is the Shabbos which comes before Purim. It is the Shabbos, as famous Chazal, Shabbos minei mizborchin kulhu yoimin, that Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week. So Shabbos gives bracha to all the days of the week, and in this forthcoming week we have such outstanding days as the days of Purim. Together with it, Shabbos also ties us with all the days in the past week. And in this past week, we had Zayin Adar, 7 days in the month of Adar. As explained Wednesday night, in the Wednesday night Farbrengen, really Zayin Adar is a key factor to the entire month of Adar. Why? Because in actuality, this is what led to the entire Nes of Purim. Because the Gemara tells us that Haman was looking for a suitable month when he could chas v'shalom fulfill his decree. And Chazal tell us he was looking through the Jewish calendar until his goyrel fell, the lot fell on the month of Adar, and he said, this is the best month. Why? Because this is the month when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. However, Chazal right away add on, he didn't know that Moshe Rabbeinu was also born on the same day. So actually, Zayin Adar is not just a day which limits us a specific happening in the month of Adar. It is a key thing to the entire month of Adar. The month of Adar is a special month. Because again, Purim is also not something which is limited to this day. We recite in the Megillah, we say, is the entire month which was turned over from a sad month to a month of joy. Now when we have the fact that Zayin Adar led to this, that's what it comes out. Zayin Adar was a key factor in leading to the Nes of Purim. B'meila, Zayin Adar is also something which is not just limited to this one day, 7 days in the month of Adar. It is something which plays a major role in the entire month. The Rebbe explained, furthermore, why Tak is Zayin Adar? Because once we already are in a month, 7 days, this gives us a good grasp of the month. We're already into the month. It's not the first day, it's not the second day. We're already strong in the month of Adar. So that is B'negei Zayin Adar. And B'negei Purim, it's also something which is not only limited to the day of Purim or the days of Purim, it is something which has an effect on the entire month. In fact, the Rebbe brought a halacha. There's a halacha that if a person is going to be away on Purim, and he will be in a situation where he will not be able to hear or read the Megillah. So the halacha is that he can read the Megillah any day in the month of Adar, even the first or second day in the month of Adar. Why? This all comes as a result, being that Purim is not something which is just limited to the day. It had an effect on the entire month. It's the month which was turned over from Yagim, from sorrow to Simcha, to joy. True, Al Pi Halacha, we are supposed to read the Megillah on the 14th day of Adar, or in those cities where it's read on the 15th day of Adar. But if this individual will be in a situation where he will not be able to hear and read the Megillah on those days, then it is perfectly okay for him to go ahead and read the Megillah on any other day in Adar, before Purim. What does all this show? It shows how the entire month was changed through the Ness of Purim. What is the inyan of Purim? The expression Purim. Where did this expression originate from? It originated from the word goyrol, a lot. Haman threw a lot to choose which month he should chas v'shalom fulfill his decree. The word goyrol in Aramaic, or in Haman's language, Iranian, is Pur. So that is where the name Purim originated from. And this name really stuck to us to such an extent that we refer to the halachas, not the halachas of Geulas, Motra ve'Esther, or we refer to think of any other title of the Yontif. Even in Shulchan Aruch, it is referred as Hilchas Purim. In the Torah it is this way, in the Beis Yosef it's that way, and all the Shulchan Aruchs always use the expression Hilchas Purim. The Rebbe says the Rambam is an exception, that the Rambam uses the expression Hilchas Megillah. But otherwise, we refer to it as Hilchas Purim. And this is the name which the Yontif has. And we are told in Chassidus that Purim is such a great Yontif, that Yom Kippur, and we all know how great Yom Kippur is. Yom Kippur is called Yom Kippur Yom Kippurim. It is a day which is similar to Purim. Not exactly. Kippurim. We always see this, there's always the hadgasha, there's always the stress with a chaf hadinyan, with a chaf of comparison. In other words, it can be compared to Purim. So when we compare one thing to another, it means Purim is greater. Purim is yet more outstanding and great. And Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim. So on one hand we find that all of this greatness of Purim, how did all of this begin? And how did all of this originate? Based on a goyrel. A goyrel, when we choose something, it is really not an organized fashion of arranging things. When something is arranged in an organized way, it's not by a goyrel. At the same time, we see, in Torah, the Rebbe says, we find in Yonim that have both milas in itself. On one hand, things are arranged in a very organized way. Very simple example. Pasha Zocher, we are told to remember. Remembering, when a person is told that he has to remember something and he has to refer back to something and has to set his memory on something that happened, this is an organized way of thinking. In other words, refer back to something which happened a while ago, a time ago. And at the same time, we tie in, on one hand, it's an inyan of Seder, of organization, and on the other hand, we find the inyan of Pur hu ha-goyrel. A goyrel is not an inyan of Seder, on the contrary. Rabbi says, we find the same idea we find in another major inyan. We find it when the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael was divided to all the Shvatim. So the Torah tells us, La'rav tarbe nachlosoi, ulam'at tamit nachlosoi, meaning that a shevet that has more people, they have to get a bigger territory. A shevet that has less people naturally should get less territory. So this is an organized approach how to divide Eretz Yisrael and to give everyone properly enough land, sufficient amount of land which they need for themselves. And at the same time we find that when Eretz Yisrael was divided to all of the Shvatim, it was divided in the form of a goyrel, of a lot, which shevet should get where. It wasn't something which anybody out of his own mind chose an opinion. Yeshua, Moshe told the Yidden, this shevet should settle on this territory, this shevet on another territory. It was all done by a goyrel. Even by Matan Torah, the Rebbe says, which Matan Torah we know is a tremendous, important thing which took place throughout Jewish history, one of the most major events. We also find how an inyan came across in a very unorganized manner. That's how we refer to it. And we refer to Aseres HaDibros. Aseres HaDibros was Achas Diber Elokim, Shtayim Zu Shamoti, Chazal tell us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said one, and Yidden heard two, and we're to such an extent that we are told that there are 620 letters in all of the Aseres HaDibros. And it is explained in Sfarim that these 620 letters, it's connected all of the Taryag mitzvahs, all of the 613 mitzvahs, together with the 7 mitzvahs, the Rabbanan. And all of this is meromez in the Aseres HaDibros. It's not something which we find it clear and organized in the Aseres HaDibros. It's not spelled out there. But we have a remez, we have a hint for it, that it is already included in the Aseres HaDibros. Memela, the Rebbe explained all of this to explain the various approaches which we find in the inyan of Purim and in the inyan of Parsha Zachar, which is also connecting the Shabbos and Purim. Another major inyan which has the shaykhs to today is the fact that today is 9 days in the month of Adar. B'negei Tes Adar, that is the day when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived here in the United States in the year of 1940. In other words, the Rebbe says, this is an additional step in the Avodah of Afatas Hamayones, of spreading Hasidus, which until then, the contact of the Frierdiker Rebbe to the United States was only through mail. He would correspond, he had Chassidim here, he would correspond to those Chassidim, he would instruct them what to do. In fact, the Rebbe says, the Frierdiker Rebbe was here once on a visit prior to him coming to settle here. That goes back to 1930, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was here for almost a year. However, then the Frierdiker Rebbe was here primarily to strengthen Yiddishkeit. When he came and got fully involved in the spreading of Hasidus, Yafutzu, Ma'inosecha, Chutza, with all the details as explained in all the Sichas, the meaning of Afatas Hamayones and the full force, and for a period of 10 years, that is as long as the Frierdiker Rebbe lived here in the United States, and 10 years, 10 years is also a cycle in itself. All of this began on this day, on the day of 9 days in the month of Adar. And after talking about this, the Rebbe referred to several announcements which were made in Shul today after davening. First, that this week it is organized by Neshei Chabad, that this is the week of the Jewish woman. The Rebbe says this is something of great importance, and later in the Farbrengen spoke about it in detail, and we will get to it, Mr. Hashem, later. Another inyan is that tonight there is a Malava Malker to raise funds to help Yidden in Russia. And the Rebbe here, and especially later, elaborated at length about the great Mesiras Nefesh which the Yidden in Russia are living through. The Rebbe said, we really cannot even appreciate the type of Mesiras Nefesh Yidden in Russia go through. To compare it to Purim, in Torah, the Alter Rebbe explains that the year that the Yidden lived in fear of the Gzeira of Haman, it took a year, approximately close to a year. The Yidden lived, the Alter Rebbe says, without any machsheves chutz, without any outside thoughts. In other words, their minds were purely set that they will go on Mesiras Nefesh and give their lives for Yiddishkeit. This, the Rebbe says, is the type of life which the Yidden in Russia are living through daily. We really cannot even understand what this is all about. Because thank God, if we want to learn Torah, we can learn Torah as much as we want. We want to fulfill mitzvahs, we can fulfill mitzvahs as much as we want. To such an extent that we even help to learn Torah, we're even assisted to fulfill mitzvahs. And we, in no way, Chas v'shalom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu merited us, and we are fortunate to live in such countries where there is no fear for learning Torah, for observing mitzvahs, and a Yid does not have to be frightened to do any of it. On the contrary, Yidden are encouraged to learn Torah and to be Mekayim mitzvahs. In Russia, it is completely different. To such an extent, the Rebbe says, that there are people in Russia today who do not even know what a yeshiva looks like. And these people are giving their lives for Mesiras Nefesh to fulfill Torah, to fulfill mitzvahs and to learn Torah. We're talking about people who never saw a Sefer Torah. Today, a child in a free country knows what a Sefer Torah is, and he knows what it's all about. To them, the Rebbe says, it is only the fact that he has heard from his parents, or perhaps from his grandparents, that they are Yidden. They are children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And with this thought, this keeps them so closely attached to Yiddishkeit that they are ready to be Mekayim mitzvahs, knowing that if they would be caught observing mitzvahs, this means that they are laid off from their jobs. And for a person to be laid off from his job, it is a mesiras nefesh, because it means simply that he will not have with what to sustain himself, his wife, and children. For a person to go through a bris in Russia, the Rebbe says, whether to circumcise himself or to circumcise his child, it means literally mesiras nefesh, to endanger himself, because it will be found out. It will not be kept as a secret. Rebbe says, as a person grows older, the child will go swimming, and it'll be noticeable, and it'll be seen. And here they're literally endangering themselves, and not taking all of this in consideration. They don't mind, and they go through circumcision of themselves and of their children and fulfill other mitzvahs, knowing that by doing so they are in constant danger. Mamish mesiras nefesh. So the Rebbe says, to us, we think that if we're busy a whole week and we're involved in our inyanim, and we are asked to grab away a half an hour to learn Torah, for a kviyas dit in b'Torah, we look at it that this is an inyan of a sacrifice. We're giving up. We're sacrificing. Let us compare it to what our brothers are going through in Russia today. And if we will realize, think for a minute, the difference of their situation and the difference of our situation, then the Rebbe says it will definitely be much easier to convince ourselves that giving up a half an hour during the week or an hour during the week is not a sacrifice. Giving up other time during the week for other inyanim of Yiddishkeit is definitely not a sacrifice. And at the same time, we have to realize that it is our obligation, the Rebbe says, that when we can do anything which is of assistance to the Yidden in Russia, we definitely have to do it. And therefore, when there's a Malav Malka tonight, which just raises funds to be able to help the Yidden that are still in Russia, it is of extreme importance to express himself. What value does it have when we consider when a person can give $1,000, $10,000, $18,000, or $100,000 for the one that can afford to give this? How in any way can this be compared to the mesiras nefesh which the Yidden in Russia are living through day by day, minute by minute, constantly living in a regime of fear? And this regime, the Rebbe says, is not since yesterday. This is something which is going on for over 50 years. A period of 50 years in the Torah is considered la'olam. It's something of eternity. And this is going on for more than 60 years. And still Yiddishkeit is there, and they're going through it with such tremendous mesiras nefesh. So if we can do things in their behalf and help them, and contribute monies to help them, Rebbe quoted the famous Chazal, more yoser mimasha balabayis oise ima'ani ha'ani oise ma'balabayis. It is more than what the contributor, the donor, does with the poor person. The poor person does more for the donor. And Rebbe quoted there is a famous medrash. The medrash says, if we have brought life to the soul of the poor, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will definitely pay back to us, and that we should never have to come on to such type of situations. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not remain a Bal Chayv, will not remain owing us. He will definitely pay us back. And the Rebbe elaborated very much about the mesiras nefesh of those Yidden. And the Yid really knows and understands that when he is zich meiser nefesh, it will be better for him in Gashmiyas and better for him in Ruchniyas. Though, at the circumstances they are living under, he cannot even see and realize and understand how is it what kind of good in Gashmias does he have. But still at the same time he does this because he knows that this is the will of the Rabbeinu Shalom, that he should sacrifice himself even if needed to fulfill the Rabbeinu Shalom's will. Another union which the Rebbe spoke about and gave it very much attention is that this week will be a siyum on a chelik of Rambam, and according to those who are learning Rambam one perek a day. And the program who learns Rambam over the telephone is arranging a siyum, I think in fact it's here, on Purim night. The Rebbe gave it tremendous amount of attention. The Rebbe says that Shir is learned in English, which is very appropriate to the days of Purim, because in the Megillah we find the expression Kil Shoin Va'am, that everything was spoken in the nation of each, in the language of each nation. And here the Rebbe says, though that he in the Farbrengens has been stressing throughout the greatness of learning the 3 prokim a day, and as always in every Farbrengen the Rebbe discusses an inyan in the Rambam, based as the Rambam is divided on 3 prokim a day. However, the Rebbe praised very highly those who cannot learn 3 prokim, and they learn 1 perek a day. And the Rebbe compared it to something which we find in Gemara. There's an expression also regarding Megillah. Gemara Megillah tells us, Mevatlen Talmud Torah lemikra Megillah, which means that if the time has come to read the Megillah, and one is in the middle of learning, so he stops his learning, he's mevatel his learning, and goes ahead and reads the Megillah. So Mefarshim ask, what's the pshat? Why do we use the expression mevatlen Talmud Torah? Why don't we mevatel Torah? We're not mevatel Torah here. What is mikra Megillah? Reading of the Megillah is also Torah. Megillah is a book of Ksuvim. So why do Chazal use the expression that we are mevatel Talmud Torah? For what? For reading the Megillah? Chazal should have used a different expression. Chazal should have expressed themselves, we stop learning any inyan of Torah and we have to read, when we have to read the Megillah. The expression of bittul means that we are actually not learning. We are wasting the time, we're not learning, but we are reading the Megillah. We are wasting our time from learning, and we are permitted at that time to read the Megillah. The Rebbe explained, when we are obligated to learn Torah, we have to learn Torah with the deepest way possible. If a Yid is capable, if one has a talent to learn, dwell deeper into Torah, and he doesn't, then it is considered that he's not learning Torah properly. See, just like there's bittul Torah in time, there's bittul Torah in eichus, in the quality of learning, in the way one learns. The reading of the Megillah is something, as the expression goes, mikra Megillah. This is something which we read. We do not learn. We do not get involved in pilpulim and in-depth understanding of the Megillah at the time the Megillah is read in shul. So that is what the Chazal tell us, mevatlen Talmud Torah. Though one may be involved in a real in-depth learning, and he's learning really le'iyun, really deep in Yonim and Torah, so still, he should stop whatever he's doing and get involved, and when the time comes, to read the Megillah. Though this is only something which, as the expression itself shows us, it's only an inyan of reading. It's a mere reading. It's not something which we go into the depth of it. What do we see from this? That if one is capable of learning deeper Torah, or learning more Torah, then he definitely has to do it. And the one who's not capable has to learn in his way. The one who's capable to learn 3 prokim a day, let him learn 3 prokim. The one, for whatever reason, it is hard on him to learn 3 prokim, then he should learn 1 perek. Talking about these inyanim, the Rebbe criticized very strongly why really stress was not made by mashpiyim and those who appointed the mashpiyim on the greatness of learning 1 perek Rambam a day. The Rebbe says a Meir Shir was prepared, which is the guide, which shows us which Perek to learn daily. However, he did not see, he's waiting for months to notice, and he does not see it, that proper attention should be given to the learning of one Perek a day. And again, the Rebbe says those who are fit to be mashpiyim, they have what to share with other people and can utilize influence on other people, it is their obligation to do so. Because if one is appointed as a mashpiyah, any appointment which one gets, this is really an appointment which comes min hashamayim. And if it's not utilized properly, then he's not fulfilling his assignment which was given to him in hashamayim. So the Rebbe says, so what do people say? What do Chassidim say? That they want to be hatzna leches im Hashem elokecha. There's a pasuk that when it comes to inyanim of Hashem, we should do things hidden. So they also feel they're going to do their things in a hidden way. What's the pshat they're going to do in a hidden way? So why? So they claim it's not befitting for them to go ahead and show their knowledge to other people and go ahead and share knowledge with other people and teach other people. He's doing things properly. He's doing things in a hidden way. And he's supposed to be a hatzna leches, which means one who does things hidden. And this goes to such an extent that they wind up really fooling their own self, because he's going to be a hatzna leches to his own self as well. He doesn't want to show himself what he really knows. And here, one led to another, as the Rebbe again saying, people who come to Farbrengen and hear how he really takes it to heart, and what really happens later is, this is put into writing, and the script of the Farbrengen also has these lines which express his aggravation on these inyanim. And the one who wants to show that he has sympathy with his aggravation is later going to buy the Sikha, the printed script, and he's going to spend money for the printed script. The money is something which is very dear to a person, so the person is willing to part with his X amount of cents to buy this Sikha, and he will maybe he will put it on his bookshelf, or maybe he will share it with somebody else, and tell somebody else about the aggravation which he had. Talking about all these inyanim. When it comes to come to a Farbrengen and listen to it, Rebbe says, there are people who want to live up to Shina b'Shabbos Tainuk, which means that sleeping on Shabbos is a pleasure. That's an abbreviation for Shabbos. And they come and they fall asleep during the Farbrengen, whether they sleep with open eyes or they sleep with closed eyes. There's those that sleep with open eyes also. And Rebbe says, furthermore, there are those that not only sleep with closed eyes, but being that we are in a public place, and the public place requires light, and the light interferes to their sleep. So what they do is they cover their faces, so that the light in the shul shouldn't be any interference to their sleep. Rebbe said that there was an expression from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe said that in the United States, there are many inyanim which are similar to hay. Hay. Straw, hay. What is the specialty which we find in hay? We find that when fire is set to hay, it burns up the hay with the straw within seconds, and it burns it so fast that we cannot even notice later that there was a fire here. Other places, when we want to get on fire, we have to be very careful how the fire should work. For example, this week we read how the menorah was lit. So we are told in detail how to go about it so that the light of the menorah, the candle, the menorah, the wick should burn properly. However, hay gets on fire extremely fast. However, how fast it gets on fire, the fire extinguishes immediately, goes away immediately. It's not even noticeable that there was a fire. It becomes ice right away. Same, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that in this country, when there is some sort of spiritual awakening to something, the awakening comes, but the unfortunate part of it is that it goes right away. It goes as fast as hay burns. And this, the Rebbe says, is definitely not the right way how an inyan should be. Proper way is that those who are fortunate, that they can be neiris lahoyer, meaning they are in a position of giving light and bringing spiritual illumination to others. And then the ultimate result will be that from them bringing light to others, the others will also be able to kindle others. And this will lead to a long chain of people bringing light, spiritual light, one to another. And when one takes it upon himself and does not do it, he's committing a terrible crime. And the Rebbe said, we are told, it is brought in Svarim, that the Torah begins with the letter Beis and concludes with the letter Lamet, Beis of Bereshis, and the last word in Chumash is La'enei Kol Yisrael. Yisrael is a Lamet. The Beis and the Lamet compose the word Leiv, heart. Mele the Rebbe said, being that what we are talking about is a Siyum HaRambam, which is also an Indian in Torah, so may Hashem help that it will be L'cha Amar Libi, that our hearts will come into a position of Bakshu Panai, meaning constantly in search of the Rebishter. Regarding Zayin Adar, the Rebbe pointed out, being that we always look to find for a shaykhs to the Rambam, from the Rambam to particular events which we are in, particular dates which we are in. The Rambam in his Hakdama, in his preface, and if we learn the Rambam, we definitely have to learn the Hakdama to the Rambam as well. The Rambam there tells us that before Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, he wrote Sefer Torahs, and he gave a Sefer Torah to each and every Shevet. When did all this happen? If we are told that Moshe did it before he passed away, this happened on Zayin Adar. So again, we have an Inyan in the Rambam, which has the Hakdama of the Rambam, which has a shaykhs to the date of Zayin Adar. Another Inyan, which the Rebbe discussed, and comes in continuation to what he spoke Wednesday night, Zayin Adar. Rebbe brought out that by Moshe Rabbeinu we find something special which we do not find by anybody else. And it's based on a pasuk. There's a pasuk, Toiv Yoim Hamise Mi Yoim Hivoldoi. I may be quoting it wrong, but that's the contents of the pasuk. That when a person passes away, then we can really have a proper analysis on the person. That's what the pasuk means. However, when a person is born, we really do not know what he's going to turn into. When a person passes away, we know what his accomplishments were. We know what he did, what he contributed, what he did, what he offered. However, when a child is born, what could we know? We can't know anything. So the Rebbe discussed Wednesday night, that this pasuk, Taki, can refer to everyone, but not to Moshe. Moshe is an exception. Why is Moshe an exception? We find it in Chumash. Because Chumash tells us that as soon as Moshe was born, Nismalei, Rashi quotes the beginning of Shemais, Nismalei habayis kuloi oira. That when Moshe was born, he brought light to the house. That the house turned full of lichtigkeit. So here we see something very strange. An infant, a baby. As soon as the baby was born, the baby had such a tremendous power, or showed such unusual things, that it brought lichtigkeit to the entire house. So this is what the Rebbe brought out Wednesday night, explaining the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rebbe says that a question was asked. He was asked a question, that there is a medrash. The medrash tells us on the pasuk, on this pasuk, Take, Toiv Yoima Mise Mi Yoimi Voldoi. The medrash continues, Zeh Moshe Rabbeinu. That who is the pasuk referring to? The pasuk is referring to Moshe. Why? Because we find by Moshe that when Moshe passed away, the man for the Yidden stopped. So here we see how great and important Moshe was. The Rebbe says, the question is a question, however, it is in no way anything contradictory to what he said. At what age did Moshe bring man to Yidden? Moshe brought the man to the... In other words, Hashem gave the man, but it was in the merit of Moshe. When did this happen? When Moshe was a man in his 80s. And all the years that the Yidden were in the Midbar, they had the man in the schus of Moshe. Naturally, there were many tremendous accomplishments which Moshe Rabbeinu did throughout his age, and to say that when he passed away, there was something which the Yidden were lacking. True. But in no way is this any contradiction to the fact that Moshe is different than any other person, by the simple reason that when any child is born, we cannot have any idea what will be with this child. However, when Moshe is born, it was extremely obvious that this is a very special child. The fact that when Moshe was born, Nismala Habayis Kuloyoyra, that it brought lichtigkeit, it brought the spiritual light into the entire house. The fact that the Medrash teaches this pasuk on Moshe is not a contradiction to what was explained in the Farbrengen of Zayin Oda. That Moshe was someone very special, that we do not have to wait and see when he passes away to see and analyze his accomplishments to such an extent. True, we find by Moshe himself that when he passed away, the man for Yidden stopped. What does this show us? It shows that the entire man wasn't the merit of the Yidden. True. This is no way a contradiction to the fact that when Moshe was born and was an infant, it still brought Eira, it brought lichtigkeit to the home where Moshe, to Moshe's family, to Moshe's parents. So immediately it was obvious that Moshe is a different type of child, a different baby than any other child. So therefore, when we're coming to analyze Moshe Rabbeinu, we see that Miyoim Hivoldei, from the day that he was born, he was a completely different person. Benegeya de Rashi in this week's Sedre, Rebbe says that we are at such special occasions. It's the Shabbos of Parshas Zachor, and it's before Purim. And normally in the Farbrengen we only discuss one Rashi. However, today we will discuss two. But the Rebbe says, one of the Rashis, he will just raise the question and will not answer a teretz, and will not give us any answer, and he will leave it up to us to search for an answer. And on the other one, he will give us an answer. In Parshas Tetzaveh, Kapitel Chav Ches, Mem Aleph, V'hilbashta. The pasuk here is talking about the special clothing which the Kohen or the Kohen Gadol was supposed to wear. The pasuk says, "V'hilbashta isam es Aaron achicha." You shall get these clothes onto Aaron, your brother, v'zbana v'itoi. U'mashachta isam, v'kidashta isam v'chihanu li. If we look into Rashi, V'hilbashta oisam es Aaron. What does Rashi comment? What will you put on Aaron? Oisam ha'amurim ba'Aaron. These clothes which were discussed by Aaron. And Rashi goes and discusses clothing. What does Rashi say? Choyshen, ve'efoid, u'me'il, uchsoines tashbeitz, mitznefes, ve'avneit, v'tzitz. Rashi lists each one of the clothes which Aaron wore. Then Rashi goes ahead, umichnasayim haksuvim lamata, and the slacks which Aaron wore, which was not discussed as yet in the pasuk, this will be discussed weiter. If we turn the page, we see in pasuk Mem Beis, he's told, "V'asei lahem michnasei bod," make them pants, slacks. Lachasis psar erva mimasnayim v'adirechaim iyu. So the Rebbe raised a very simple question. And he says, if the pasuk has not mentioned anything about the pants, why does Rashi have to mention about the pants? Furthermore, if the pasuk here would refer to the pants as well, then the pasuk Mem Beis, which discusses the commandment of making pants, would have been mentioned prior to this pasuk. Should have been mentioned before the pasuk of V'hilbashta isam. Then we will say that the V'hilbashta isam refers to all the clothing, including the mechnasayim, including the pants. Being that we see from the pasuk itself that the pasuk puts v'asei lahem michnasei bod after this pasuk of v'hilbashta isam. So this in itself is an indication that the clothes we are talking here is only the clothes which were discussed till now. However, the michnasayim we're not talking about. In fact, Adam Mefarshei HaTorah, Rebbe says the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. The Orach Chaim HaKodesh, the Rebbe says, discusses many inyanim which are not in the realm of Pshat, but he also explains Pshat. And when he talks about Pshat, Taka learns that the pasuk of Hilbashta is the clothes which were put on Aaron, Taka do not refer to the Mechnasayim. Why? As just explained, because the pasuk hasn't spoken about the existence of making Mechnasayim yet. And Rashi, Mechnasayim, pants. And Rashi, we see, for some reason, lists all the special clothes which a Kohen Gadol wore, and also includes Mechnasayim aksuvim lamata, and the Mechnasayim which we will talk about soon, which we haven't learned about yet. This, the Rebbe says, is an obvious question in the realm of Pshat, and definitely requires an interpretation. Why Rashi does this? Why Rashi learns that the Vilbashta Isam also refers to Mechnasayim? At the time, from the Psukim, if we go according to the sequence of the Psukim from Pshut to Shalom Mikra, it seems that the pasuk here is referring to all the clothes except Mechnasayim, because the Mechnasayim we're not told about yet. This comes on in a later pasuk. Another inyan, this question the Rebbe left open as a question that we should look for a teretz. Then we come to pasuk Mem Beis. Pasuk Mem Beis says, "Va'asei lahem michnasei bod," to make the Mechnasayim, the pants. So Rashi comments, Harei ches begodim l'kohen gadol. Now we have 8 begodim for the kohen gadol, va'arba l'kohen hedyet, and that the kohen hedyet would be wearing 4 garments for the regular kohen, and 8 garments for the kohen hedyet. I'm sorry, for the kohen gadol. Rabbi says, why is there a need for Rashi to specify it? If we go through the psukim, we will count the various garments which we are told to make for the kohen gadol. The garments which we are told to make for the kohen hedyet, we will see that the kohen hedyet has 4 and the kohen gadol has 8. Any child who's learning the pasuk can total up to 8 or up to 4. Why is there a need for Rashi to tell us that the kohen gadol wears 8 garments and the regular kohen wears 4 garments? So the Rebbe is explaining this, that if we look through the parsha here, we will notice that right in pasuk Mem, we are told, "V'levnei Aaron taseh kotonos, v'asisa lehem avneitim u'migbois taseh lehem l'chavidu l'seforis." Migbais means a hat. That's what a migbas means. If we look through the psukim, and we go through each and every garment which has been mentioned, and if we look carefully, we'll really find not 8 begodim are mentioned for the kohen gadol, but they're taken 9. The mitznefes, which is a hat, and the migbas, which is also a hat, it's used with different expressions. And if Rashi would not tell us Harei ches, that there is a total of 8 only, then we may be led to learn that the mitznefes and the migbas, we're talking about 2 different types of hats, or 2 different shape of hats or whatever. So that is why Rashi comes to tell us, you should know that what we're talking about, there is only a total of 8 begodim for the kohen gadol. Rebbe says, while talking about this inyan, there's a very interesting Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, there's Rabbi Yossi in Yerushalmi that comes up with a very interesting opinion. Each and every garment which was made for the Kohenim, the Kohen got 1 of it, or the Kohen Gadol, 1 of every one of the garments. It comes to the shirt, the kotonos. Rabbi Yossi in Yerushalmi tells us that the Kohen got 2 kotonos. The Rebbe says, what's the source of his opinion? Because if we look into pasuk Mem, pasuk says, "V'levnei Aaron," to the children of Aaron, "Taseh kotonos," you shall make kotonos plural. So obviously he learns that more than 1 ksonis was made. The pasuk says avneitim, gartlen. The pasuk says migbois, hats. Why doesn't he say that he was given more than 1 gartel, or he was given more than 1 hat? So the Rebbe brought out a very interesting thing. The Rebbe says, if we look into the pasuk, there's something very strange. Pasuk says in Kapitel Chavches Pasuk Mem, The pasuk says, "V'levnei Aaron ta'aseh kotonis." To the children of Aaron, you should make kotonis. Then the pasuk goes on, "V'asisa lahem," and you should make them avneitim umikbois. Why is there another v'asisa lahem? You should make them. Pasuk begins, "V'levnei Aaron ta'aseh kotonis." To the children of Aaron, you should make shirts. Let the pasuk omit the word v'asisa lahem. Make them shirts, make them gartlan and hats. Why does the pasuk insert two words of v'asisa lahem? So this is what the Rebbe is learning. This is what led Rabbi Yossi to say that it's two types of making. Livnei Aaron ta'aseh kotonis, a special thing, that it comes to shirts for whatever reason, and obviously the Rebbe says the reason could be a very simple one, being that this is something which is worn on the body, and the person perspires a lot. That's why this garment can become ruined faster than other garments. That is why ta'aseh kotonis. You make him kotonis loshen rabim. Then the pasuk puts in the word v'asisa lahem, a different type of making. Regarding the avneitim umikbois, which is also discussed in the loshen rabim, however, here it's a different v'asisa lahem. Why rabim avneitim umikbois? Because you made more than one. You made it for many kohanim. But it doesn't mean that you gave him more than one gartel or you gave him more than one hat. You gave each one of the kohanim that whom it was made for a hat and a gartel. So that is why the pasuk is mafsik with the v'asisa lahem, to show that it's a different type of making. There's a making of the shirts. Shirts he gave him, look at it. Here we don't teach you made many shirts because they were made for many people. Taki, you made many shirts for many people, but you gave each one of them two shirts. Comes to the avneitim umikbois, v'asisa lahem, the pasuk puts in an extra word. Because here you made plural, you made many gartlan, you made many hats, however you did not give it to them. True, the Rebbe says, in Gemara we find an expression that the avneitir shel kohen gadol, the gartel of the kohen gadol, would become ruined. So then, when it became ruined, you replaced it to him, you gave him another one. However, regarding to the shirts, it seems to say that there's an opinion in Yerushalmi, which is Rabbi Yossi, that tells us that shirts were taki given two rather than one, as opposed to all other garments which were given to the Kohanim and to the Kohanim G'dayla. And the Rebbe was debating a lot in this Inyan al Pinigla, as what were they given to. The Rebbe says he wouldn't want to learn that it was a type of a concept of giving one in reserve for another. That they were given to him in case one gets ruined. He didn't fully accept it that it was this way. He was debating, perhaps it's for this reason, perhaps it's for the reason that taka, this is a garment that gets ruined faster than others and so forth. B'negeya the Rambam, in the Shiurim of Rambam, according to the three prakim a day, the halachas which I learned in the Rambam today are the halachas of Chazakeh. These are the dinim which are discussed at length in Masechta Bava Basra. A chazakah means an expression of ownership. In Gemara it's discussed that if a person possesses a field for 3 years, this is a sign that he owns the field. Because would he not be the real owner, then the real owner definitely would not let him sit there for 3 years and act as an owner or hold on to it, make himself as a balabas. And when the Rambam discusses these halachas, the Rambam tells us there are various exceptions. Exceptions are Baal b'nichse ishtoi, or Isha b'nichse Baala. If we see a woman managing her husband's properties, or a husband managing his wife's properties, even if this goes on for more than 3 years, it's not an indication of chazakah. Because it is common that one spouse manages the other one's properties. The same av ubein, a father and a son, or the same shutfim, partners. When people are partners in business, they're not as accurate, and as long as they're partners, one could be managing one property, the other one could be managing another property, and the fact that we see this partner in this property for more than 3 years is not an indication that it is his. He's only there as a manager for his partner. Rabbi says that in the in the halacha and the lumdis of these inyanim, there's much written and discussed in all yeshivish mesechtes and in all commentaries. And what he would prefer to is discuss this halacha in the Rambam, as he does recently in the Farbrengens, in an interpretation in Avodas Hashem. It goes on and continues that every Yid has a chazakeh, every Yid has an ownership and reward from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an Olam Haba. This is what every Yid has. Excuse me. Before I go into the spiritual interpretation, the Rambam says there are exceptions. A son who was away from his father, though that normally father and son do not express an inyan of chazakeh, however, if the son was away from his father for a long period of time, and now he comes back, and he sits 3 years in the field, this is a siman of chazakeh. Another exception, the Rambam says, is a woman who's divorced from her husband, a grusha. A grusha, in other words, she will not manage her husband. He's not her husband any longer. So if she's been holding on possession to the field for 3 years, it is definitely a sign that this field is hers. Furthermore, the Rambam uses the expression, not only a woman who is divorced, but even a safek grusha. If we are in doubt, we also consider it that she is managing her own fields, not managing the fields of her husband or ex-husband. The same the Rebbe interprets these inyanim in the spiritual interpretation as well. Every Yid is a muhsik, has a chazakeh, an olam haba, on getting rewards from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yidden to the Rebishter are children. Yidden with the Rebishter are partners. We are HaKadosh Baruch Hu's partner. Gemara tells us that. Gemara tells us that any Yid that observes Shabbos properly, Gemara tells us, Nase shutef LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'maaseh bereishis, becomes a partner to Hashem in the creation of the world. The Rebbe stresses always that a partner means not the pshat one half belongs to one, another half belongs to another. A partner means that they're equal ownership in the entire 100% of the item. The same the Rebbe says, if we are told that a Yid becomes a shutef with the Rebishter, imagine what kind of great thing it is. We are partners with the Rebishter in the creation of the world, not only from the day HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, dating back from the first second which HaKadosh Baruch Hu began creating the world, a Yid can lift himself up to be a partner with the Rebishter. However, a Yid is also considered a divorcee. What's the pshat? Divorced? In the positive sense. A Yid divorces himself from all of his inyanim of Elam Haba, of Elam Hazeh. Sorry. Of all inyanim of Elam Hazeh. He divorces himself from all worldly things, separates himself, and gets involved solely in inyanim of Kedusha, in inyanim of holiness. Or like the other example, a child who traveled away from his father and later returns to his father, which we are in that position as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the father, Yidden are the children. However, there are times when the child has traveled away from his father for a long time and later returns. Here the Rambam tells us that here definitely the rules of Chazakah apply. And meaning that each and every Yid will has a chazakeh that ultimately he will be rewarded. It is his expression of ownership. And all of the inyanim of Elam Haba and all the rewards which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to give us, we have the chazakeh, we can claim it. What's the pshat of chazakeh? Chazakeh in halacha means that when one has a chazakeh, it means that when it comes to court, he has good ground to claim it. It is his. The same the Rebbe says in the spiritual sense. Though everything we get is from the Rebishter. The Rebishter gives us a house to be able to knock the mezuzah on. The Rebishter gives us everything we should be able to fulfill all our needs. However, at the same time, we go into the category of, just like in the halachic sense, the Rambam explains, the one who is a woman who is divorced, when she holds on to nichsei baila, it is hers with a 3-year chazakah, with the nechasim of, not necessarily nechasim, nechasim she holds on to. The same, Yidden are considered that it is owed to us by the Rebishter will have to give it to us the best and highest level of reward which the Rebishter will have to give to each and every Yid. The Rebbe again spoke, he says he cannot, it was spoken about many occasions, but we have to mention it again, that this week is Purim, and we have to see to it, to reach out to as many Yidden as possible, that they should fulfill the mitzvahs of Purim, the mitzvah of Shalach Manos, the Matanos Lavyonim, and so forth, and all the mitzvahs that are involved in the great Yontav of Purim. To those who are already involved in the Miftzayim, and are already active, the Rebbe is just saying that we have to increase our activity, and increase it on all levels, b'mamaynai, b'gufai, b'nishmasai, with our soul, with our body, with our funds. To those who as yet are not involved in the Miftzayim, there is still time to get involved heavily in the Miftzayim, and see to it that each and every Yid should be able to fulfill and observe Purim properly, and fulfill all the mitzvahs of Purim. And the Rebbe added on, though that on Purim we are obligated to fulfill Ad Layada, however, the preparations for the mitzvah of Purim we cannot prepare in a format of Ad Layada. If we will prepare in an Ibekerenish of Ad Layada, then the Rebbe says we will not be able to accomplish anything. So the preparations have to be in a real organized way, in a proper way, in an organized way. And once the preparations are properly, then we will be able to enjoy Purim, enjoy it at the highest level of Ad Layada. The Rebbe said that even when we're talking about Ad Layada, it still seems that there are levels, there are madrigas in Ad Layada. And the Rebbe said, referred to conversation he once had with somebody, and this particular person told him that he had to drink a certain amount of wine in order that he should be able to become Ad Layadadik. He should go out of his limitations, out of his boundaries. The Rebbe says, he asked him, is it the same amount of wine that gets every person into Ad Layada? The Rebbe says, he tells the Rebbe, how can you say that? Definitely not. I have a good head, this person says. I have a big mind. How can you compare me to somebody else? Takes me a lot of wine to get me into an Ad Layada. And a simple person becomes Ad Layada with much less wine. How can you compare? In other words, this person is telling the Rebbe, how can you compare my Ad Layada to somebody, my getting the amount of wine which requires me to get Ad Layada to somebody else's? So then the Rebbe says, I asked him, but what's about the Ad Layada itself? Is yours and the other person's equal? Are they the same? So he says, how can you compare? Definitely not. My Ad Layada is a much greater one. See, the truth is, Ad Layada really means a person gets so freilach and so joyous on Purim. Mara uses the expression Ad Layada until he does not know the difference between Aruch Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So it seems that in the not knowing, there are also levels of not knowing. There are lower, simpler levels and higher levels, and yet higher levels. Said he would conclude the Farbrengen with what he mentioned early in the Farbrengen regarding Tetzaveh, which is the date when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived here in the United States, and he got heavily involved here in America with spreading Yiddishkeit. Rebbe says if we want to look for inyanim which have transpired on certain Jewish dates, we have to turn to, there is a sefer called Megillas Tainis. And in Megillas Tainis it's discussed inyanim that happened on certain dates in Jewish history. And there it is brought that the day of Tes Adar, 9 days in the month of Adar, was once upon a time a fast day. Why? Because this is the day that the machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai began. Memela machlokes is not something which is appreciated, which is desirable. And that's why Megillas Tainis tells us that in those days it was a day of fast to Yidden. There are two versions in the Megillas Tainis. There's one that says It is the day that the machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai began. There's another version that says that is the day of machlokes of Hillel and Shammai. The Rebbe explained it, however, that it is based on what Chassidus tells us. Chassidus tells us at great length. It explains the difference between Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi. Talmud Bavli is composed in a completely different way than Yerushalmi. In the Bavli, we have the Babylonian Talmud, we always have a kasha, teretz, and another kasha, and another teretz, and there are times that in one sugya there may be many, many questions and many interpretations and until we finally come to the